Growing a podcast can feel overwhelming with the technical challenges, content creation demands, and the daunting task of audience building. Take it from us, we've been trying to do it for about a year now. The time investment required and the pressure of public speaking can add to the stress, making it hard to find a clear path to success. But fear not, because this is the way to grow a podcast. Travis Chappell is a seasoned expert in podcast growth with years of experience helping entrepreneurs build and monetize their shows. As an author, the founder of Guestio, and host of the successful Travis Makes Friends podcast, Travis has a proven track record of guiding podcasters to achieve their goals and expand their reach. Welcome, Travis.
Hey, thanks a lot, guys. I love the intro. Now, that was pretty much all the time I needed to fill right there. So
Perfect.
Yeah. We got so many questions for you. So
we actually had to hold back on that intro, but we got to set up for you in our first question because it's like the caliber of guests that you've had on your show is super impressive. It intimidates, I think, many, or at least creates admiration as we look at that. I mean, from the likes of Shaq, Arton being a Lakers fan there, from Grant Cardone to John Maxwell to Amy Porterfield to Patrick Bet-David. It's incredible. So diving straight into what the heck is your secret to getting these guests?
Oh man, that's if I had to boil it down, it's really just it's the boring, simple stuff that most people just don't like doing is really what it is. It's just a combination of persistence and consistency multiplied over time. Lots of rejection along the way, lots of just reaching out to people and asking, and a lot of people saying no, and then getting lucky every once in a while, and one person says yes, and then one person says yes, it makes it a little bit easier to get the next person to say yes, which makes it a little bit easier to get the next person to say yes, and then so on and so forth. You multiply that, like I said, over enough reach outs, enough asks, and enough time, then you can end up talking to a lot of people that you never thought would even give you the time of day. So it's really as simple as that. I mean, and that's really what eventually led me to build my company Guestio, because like that was the thing that people kept asking me about. It was just like, how'd you get that person? How'd you get this person? How'd you get that person? And the answer is really always about, like, when it comes to getting really big names on your show and nailing down really good interviews, a lot of times it's not even about how many downloads you have or how big your reach is or what your audience looks like, although that is a factor. The main question that most people have in their mind, especially busy people, is, are you going to waste my time? That's the only question that they really have in their mind. Now, if you have a massive audience, it makes it easy to answer that question, right? Like, they know that it's not going to be a waste of time if you have it. Nobody, like Joe Rogan can get anybody he wants to get because his show is massive. So it's never a waste of time for anybody going on that show because they could always use more reach. So if you don't have audience, you have to figure out other ways to answer that question, and so sometimes especially when you're first starting out, the only way to make sure that happens is getting those first couple of people to say yes, and then leveraging that credibility to get more and more people to say yes. So that's kind of why we built Guestio, was just like, hey, if you don't want to sit here and wait like I did for 2-3 years to get some of these really big names on your show, then maybe go pay a speaking fee and get them to come on your show. But if you get 2 or 3 of them to say yes, even with the speaking fee, it's like you don't have to continue to pay for everybody all the time. It's just like you get a couple people in, then you can leverage those names and use that credibility to go, get other people on the show and start booking some people you really want to chat with. So yeah, it's kind of the boring answer, but that's legit what it was.
And was it like in those early days, was it just email reach outs? I mean, is that your medium that you use to connect?
Email. I mean, really the answer is anything at my disposal.
Got it.
Whatever, wherever that person is active, wherever they're not active. If they had a product or service, I would buy it and use it. I would comment on their stuff, I want them to see me all the time. Who's this Travis guy? Like, can I be one of their top fans? And then Instagram has been one of probably the most effective place for me out of all of the platforms. Number one, because I like it the best, and that's where probably my best visual presence is of all of them, and that makes it a little bit easier. But also just because of the feature set. So, from stuff like I'm an avid podcast listener and I follow a lot of people. And so whenever something resonates with me, if they're kind of on my list, I'll post about it and just like maybe post a picture from like their book that I'm reading and tag them as the author, or post a screenshot of their podcast and tag them and recommend it and share. Anybody who creates wants other people to share their stuff, regardless of how big or small your audience is. And so what happens is Instagram has this cool feature where if you do that, in order for them to like repost it to their story, or for them to like it, or send back an emoji, or send back a, hey, thanks for sharing, they have to accept the message request in their DMs. And when they accept the message request, then I know that if I reach out to them after that, that I'll be in their primary inbox rather than in their message requests with 3,000-4,000 other people. And so I'm much more likely to get into their like primary inbox if I start with something like, you know, really enjoying so-and-so's book, here's a quote from it, or, you know, check out this podcast episode, it's hilarious and awesome and I learned a lot, you know, and I share it. Like, they're way more likely to respond positively to that and accept the message request. I get in their primary inbox, and then I can shoot them a DM directly from there and make an ask. But yeah, it's like those little things that you figure out over time. But of all the I use every platform at my disposal, whatever I can, in-person events, introductions from people that I know, all those things. But in terms of like cold outreach specifically, Instagram's probably been the highest rate of success for me.
I would have never guessed, actually.
No, and now I've just learned that. I'm like, aha, that's my issue. Because there's, we've been looking for some individuals who are like experts when it comes to Instagram. And so far as I've reached out to some individuals there, I've even tried them over on LinkedIn because I'm like, maybe they'll check those and their DMs over here are too busy and crazy. But I realized just as you said that, I'm like, huh. And it's that obvious one where it's like, I haven't added the value yet to them because I didn't know how to break through that on Instagram. What you just said is like, duh. So,
well, especially now because there's so many spammers on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Twitter. They just have like automation, reach out, cold DM campaigns running all the time. And so, you know, even people that don't have big followings get dozens of message requests from spam all the time. So people with big followings get message requests all the time from fans, from spammers, from people who want to do business with them, for like anybody who has an ask of them. And so, yeah, if you can just, you know, that's why I have to be intentional about it. Like, make a list of the people you want to bring on, follow them closely. And when they have something valuable, comment on it, comment something meaningful, not just like a, you know, prayer hands emoji or something like that. Like, comment on like something meaningful that you learned from it, or like an opinion that you hold about it, like a solid paragraph. Like, people will check that stuff. Most of them, if they're creating or they care about creating at all, they'll check that stuff. And if you are constantly like showing up as like, you know, this Travis Chappell guy like keeps commenting on all my stuff, you know what I mean? And then you can repost to something or share something, and then they repost it on their story or something like that happens. Like I said, you get accepted to that primary inbox, and then I'll shoot them a video instead of just a text DM. So like both of you guys right now, you're in nice studios. You obviously have some sort of like lighting, camera setup, microphones set up. You will come across professional on a video where not everybody will be able to do that. So I try to leverage that. So like literally I'll sit exactly where I am right now and I'll put my phone out right here. And even though obviously like my audio isn't tied into my phone or whatever, it's mostly just like a credibility thing. Like, I put my phone out in front of me and shoot them a quick video and just like, hey, so-and-so, I call them by name because I want them to know this is not an automated DM. Like, I'm not just reaching out to 1,000 people with the same exact message. It's like, hey, Michael, like, hey, I really appreciated this part from your book, or here's something I really learned that I took away from that. And it prompted me to reach out because I have this podcast. And I'd love to have a conversation with you sometime. And then I'll drop text below the video, because I don't want to send them like 6 videos, you know what I mean? Or like 5 minutes of video in their DMs. It's like, I'll send them a 30-second video to introduce myself, let them know, like show them video evidence that I'm calling them by name. It's a personalized message, and that I actually know that I look and sound professional and articulate. You know what I mean? So I'll shoot them that, and then I'll drop some more info below this video if you want to check it out, and, you know, looking forward to hearing back from you. And then I'll put like a text copy in there about like, here's some people I've interviewed, here's some stats on the show. You know, would love to have a chat sometime.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like you get in your head and you think like, there's no way so-and-so will respond if I shoot them. You know what I mean? And to be fair, there's been a ton of people that haven't responded to me. That I, like, there's still an unseen video, an unwatched video, and an unread message in their Instagram inbox that's probably been there for 4 years now. You know what I mean? So there's plenty of people who've never responded, but also I've still been surprised to this day about how many people who I never thought would respond actually do respond.
That's incredible. And again, we had a greatly shortened your list because you've been around for about 1,000 podcasts now, needless to say. So you've had so many of them, and I just had to pick out some of the my favorites from there. But your whole life, for lack of a better way to put it, seems to be based around these concepts where a lot of it is about connecting with people, connecting with people that you admire. I mean, the name of your podcast, Travis Makes Friends, which what a great icebreaker for having a podcast named that, because automatically from the beginning, any guest that comes on, it's like, almost a little more relaxed, because it's like, well, we're just here to make friends. But I know, a core component, at least in the past of it, has been, again, that networking side of things. So I'm curious what led to that, and why, now the focus being Travis Makes Friends. I know you rebranded at some point. Just curious to understand a little more about that as well.
Yeah, sure. So the initial concept came almost out of like desperation, if I'm being honest. I grew up in a kind of a religious bubble of sorts. And when I came out of that world in my early 20s, I was quite literally starting from scratch in terms of relationships. Like, the majority of the people that I knew, I grew up with them. They were all in that kind of cultish world. And when I left it, a lot of people didn't really follow in or care about what I was doing after that. And so I was kind of, alone, starting from scratch. And so I knew I wanted to be in business. I had no idea where to even get started. I'd never even met a millionaire, let alone like had personal close friendships or relationships with any of them that I could like ask them questions about what I should do to get there. And so I listened to a ton of podcasts and was like, maybe I should start a show. And I was like, but what am I going to talk about? At the time I was a 24-year-old just door-to-door sales guy that was, a unaccredited Bible college graduate. It's like, there's not many things that I can talk about from an expert perspective. But the nice thing about podcasting is you don't have to be the expert to start a show. You just have to find experts and ask them questions. Being an expert isn't a prerequisite. Adding value is a prerequisite, but you don't have to be the one adding value if you can find people who can add the value for you and ask them good questions, So I figured that out pretty early on. And the networking thing was just like, I had some success in door-to-door sales, but I didn't want to talk about door-to-door sales because I was trying to get out of that world. And I knew that if I started a show about it, it would pigeonhole me into continuing to talk about that. And so I was like, what would be the other thing that I would attribute some of like the success that I'd had up at that point? And it was always like, well, it seems like the thing that I've always done well is whenever I learn a new product or I learn how to sell something, I always go to the top performer and hang out with them as much as I possibly can and learn as much as I can from them. I don't try to reinvent the wheel. I don't try to tell them how to do their job. I just get around them, absorb, observe, and ask questions, and then replicate what works. And that always took me from like being brand new to being like the top sales guy in the office within 3 months. It didn't seem like it was that confusing. It seemed like pretty straightforward, And so I was like, networking, like that's something I could talk about. I happen to need a new network of people. I don't really know anybody in this world. So let me talk about networking. So the show I launched was called Build Your Network. And it was called Build Your Network for a really long time. It was very corporate-y, kind of professional. And I just along the way, we did it for 4 or 5 years, 700 something episodes, Build Your Network. And it did a lot of great things for me, but towards the end, I was just getting bored with it, to be honest with you, bored with the same conversation over and over and over and over and over again with the same type of guest talking about the same stuff. And it started to be a drag on my calendar and a drag on my energy rather than like looking forward to doing interviews. It was like, I was dreading, oh man, I got this interview coming up with this, like it's another business coach with another book, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's not like I don't like business coaches. It's not like I don't like talking to them. It was just like interviewing and asking the same questions. It just got so monotonous and boring. And I was like, man, this is the opposite of the reason I started a show. So I either need to like stop doing this, or I need to get back into the reason I started doing a show, which is like fueling me up, giving me energy, letting me connect with people I want to talk to, and kind of quenching my own curiosity, I guess. And so at that time I rebranded, and that was about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. So we rebranded from Build Your Network to Travis Makes Friends. And the core idea of the show is still very similar. It's still very much like story-based. You still talk to people that I'm interested in talking to. We still have an entrepreneurial leaning. We still talk about relationships. We still talk about some of the same concepts and themes. But like what you alluded to at the beginning of this is like, it's just very much, it's more laid back. It's more conversational. It's more approachable. Since then, that this is like around the time where I was able to talk to, more like comedians and athletes and entertainers. And it was like, I had a few NBA players on and people that I watched growing up and stuff like that. And then was able to have like, Dane Cook and, some actors and people that, again, that I remember watching as a kid, or Rob Dyrdek and on Ridiculousness, and just like some different people like that were just interesting to me, so.
Rob's amazing. Like, I used to enjoy multiple versions of his show, but it's so crazy what he's done on Entrepreneur Front. So yeah, I can only imagine people like that right?
Yeah.
People wouldn't expect.
So yeah, that's kind of the background of the story of, the theme and why we've stuck with it for so long.
Got it. And then about 5 years ago, you wrote a book as well, that's related to that topic of networking. What led you to write that book?
Yeah, honestly, I haven't talked much about the book because like it was more like we used it almost as like a credibility lead magnet thing, and I just have like it's like a mental block as a creator, like that's why I've never promoted it. You've like never heard me talk about it. So I know you did research to know that I actually wrote a book, because I never actually talk about it. And my producer all the time is like, why don't you ever promote that book? Like, I was like, I don't know. I just don't like it. It's just like, it's good stuff. It was just basically what happened was we took a free course that I had called Meet Your Hero, and then I transcribed it and had a ghostwriter turn it into a book, so that we could like launch it when we were doing this live event thing and like position me as an authority in the space and all this other stuff. But I just didn't, I was never like proud of it as like, again, as a creator, I want like the book that the next book that I write to be something more thoughtful, something more, I want to add to the, cultural knowledge base rather than like just use it as like a online business card to get more business with. But I will say the information in the book is still helpful. And it's the exact like step-by-step process that I use to connect with people. It's called Meet Your Hero. It's like the 5-6 steps that I use to connect with all the people that I've connected with. It's very, very practical, very exercise based. But yeah, it was more just like, we're doing a live event. It'd be cool to have like a book signing and launch it there, and then position myself as an authority, because we need to sell this product that we're going to be selling at the event, and we want to make sure that we do that properly. So
that makes sense, and I mean, it gives some insights into how you were looking at your whole world, and also figuring out how you monetize it. So I'm actually curious to dive into that a little bit more. As well as like, at what point, like for you in the podcast, did it start getting to a point where you're like, okay, I got to start capturing this in a bottle, or start spitting it out into these other products and things like that, because I'm making some assumptions here that, as an entrepreneur, this is where that kind of, I don't want to call it an empire. That sounds too much like empire building, but that you've built out, like what was the progression to that? Because I know starting a podcast initially could be a slow move.
Oh, yes. When I started the show, I had zero intention of starting a business or becoming a marketer or like doing any of those things. I just wanted to have a show that I could monetize with sponsorships. But pretty quickly after I launched, I realized how heavy of a lift that was going to be, and how much time it was going to take. And that like, I kind of missed the boat already. And this was like 2017. But I had missed the boat in terms of like starting a show, at the time, everybody was teaching you the same stuff. It was like, because I hired a coach and I joined a mastermind and I did all this info products, and I tried to, launch the best way I could. I invested like 20, 30 grand in the stuff when I was launching it. So I give myself the best chance of success. I did everything I was told to do, and I got the result that everybody said I would get, which is like, get onto the top charts, like, rank high. And then once you get booked on the top charts, you get this windfall of traffic coming in because people are constantly browsing for new shows. But by the time I had started my show, the people that were teaching me that had launched their shows like 3 or 4 years before that. And that was really the time where that was still a strategy to be able to grow your show. Now it's like I've been on the top charts on and off for the last 4 or 5 years, for years at a time, months at a time. It's never been a correlation to growing the actual downloads on my show. And so when I did that and I launched and I got that result, but then the end result didn't come, it was like, oh, my downloads aren't growing, but I did everything to like that everybody told me to do. It was like, what am I going to do here? Do I just stop doing the show? I've already invested, a lot of money in getting this thing off the ground. But at this point, like it's going to take years to get to the number of downloads that I need to get to in order to be able to like monetize directly through sponsorships to the degree where I can do this full time. And so I started looking around at what other people were doing and realizing like, oh, a lot of people use this as kind of a lead into a business, but I was like, I don't have a business. So I use something called the ask method, which is basically just build an audience of people around a niche or topic, and then get to know that audience, their problems, their concerns. And then over time, build a product or service that solves the problems or concerns that your audience is having, and they'll tell you what to build. And so that's essentially the route that I took. So I launched in like August of 2017, and I launched my first product in December, which was like this, mastermind, group mastermind thing. It was $1,000 for 3 months, and I included like a $900 event ticket to a business event coming up. So like it was a total wash. I didn't make any money on it, but it proved that it was possible. Like it proved that people were willing to pay $1,000 to like, to be in a group that I was organizing, even though like I'd only been doing it for a couple months.
And what was the focus of that one?
It was called Build Your Network.
Okay. So still
Build Your Network Alpha, I think is what it was called. So it was kind of like, like, hey, you want to build your network because you're listening to the show. If you want to join a community of like-minded people, then join this group. And it's like the next step for Build Your Network, fans or whatever. I think I sold like 6 people for 3 months, and it was like $6,000. But like I said, I spent all the money back into the group.
Yeah.
But then I launched another product, and it was another mastermind, and it was $500 a month, that one. And I got like 7 or 8 people into that one and started making some money doing it. And then I just kept listening to what people were asking from me, you know what I mean? So the way I was able to go full-time, I went full-time, quote unquote, on my online business, and stopped doing door-to-door sales within about a year of launching the show, like 13 months of launching the show. And the reason I was able to do that is because I started taking one-on-one podcast coaching clients, which I had no intention of doing. But then all of a sudden people were just like, hey, I have this, digital marketing agency, but I've always wanted to start a podcast. How did you do X, Y, and Z? And it was just like, oh, well, I did this, this, and this. And they're like, well, can you like help me actually launch my show? And I was like, sure. It's 50, and I knew what my coach had charged me, you know what I mean? So I was like, yeah, sure. It's $1,500 for 8 weeks, which was like less than half of what my coach charged me. But I was like, yeah, I'm just starting out. We'll figure it out. And then they were like, all right, sure. And they sent me the money, and I was like, oh, okay, well, that went pretty well. And so within like 3 or 4 months, I had 4 or 5 podcast coaching clients, and I kept raising the price every time I pitched somebody, and they kept buying at the prices that I was charging. And then within a few months, I had people paying a lot more to learn how to podcast. And so I started really leaning into that and helping people with podcasting. I was still running a mastermind. And then I was full time. And then the first full year, so I went full time in September of 2018. And then 2019, we did like 400,000 in revenue or something like that in the business, doing like masterminds and coaching and things like that, all stemming from the podcast. So yeah, the podcast was the catalyst for all of it. It was what made us able to work.
These early clients, were their interest around just how to get a podcast started, or was it, I have a podcast, but I'm kind of stuck now, I don't know what to do?
The one-on-one clients were, I want to get a podcast started.
Got it.
So I helped them through the whole launch process. Yeah. But yeah, eventually, like I kept trying to do the networking angle, because I was like, my show's Build Your Network. So like, I got to do something around networking. And I kept trying to come up with these offers, and I kept trying to shove them down people's throats, And then at the same time, I had people like asking me to coach them with podcasting. And then like, it hit me one day when I sold 2 podcast coaching clients in like a week, and it was for $15,000 each. I think it was like 4 months of coaching, like 16 weeks or something of weekly coaching. for 15 grand, and I sold both of them. And like that was a time where it hit me, and I was like, it's like pulling teeth to try to sell this $300 networking course that I created. But people are asking me if they can pay me 15 grand for one-on-one coaching to help them launch their podcast. So maybe I should like do more of that.
Would you say that's because the networking side of it, success is a little questionable, like but the success in pod, it's so black and white. It's like you either launched or you didn't.
Right. Yeah, it's much more linear. In networking, it's very difficult to sell. It's very difficult to sell a result because the result is so subjective across a subset of people. Like everybody's going to look at the end result as a different version of the result. So it's more difficult to sell just because you can't guarantee a certain like outcome for them. So I leaned more into one-on-one coaching, and then I had a mastermind, a group mastermind.
Okay. And then today, where do you spend the majority of your time? Is it still within those pockets? Do you do any of the networking side at all anymore when it comes to the program?
No, it's all Guestio and my podcast is where I spend my time now. So
you still have a program though, but is it more of just a self-serve?
No.
You don't even know. Oh, okay. I saw on your site, so I wasn't sure if it was still.
Though it exists. Yeah, I guess that would be the improper way to say that. It exists. We just don't spend any time trying to get people to take it, or like, because before before COVID, I was running traffic to a webinar, and I was actively like selling my Podcast Profit Academy, like an online course. And so we scaled that up pretty nicely during that time. And but then it was right around the time where I had pivoted to start Guestio and pivoted away from selling my mastermind, because my mastermind was very in-person experiential. Like it was like a travel mastermind. It was called Cool People, Cool Places. And so we took people to like Breckenridge for a snow retreat, and we were taking them to Costa Rica for a lifestyle retreat in Costa Rica and stuff. And then COVID happened and obviously shut down all international travel. And so we had to postpone the fulfillment of the mastermind that we sold. And it just like elongated the timeline and everything, and took away our core revenue stream. And so that was when I started working on Guestio.
Okay. Oh, interesting. So Guestio came during COVID pandemic?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Interesting. And which makes me curious too, because I think a lot of your podcast, at least I think everyone that I've seen, although maybe I'm wrong on this, but you're usually in the same room with the person. Do you try to do that with your guests, or do you actually have a lot of ones that are also this style?
At this point, 95% are in person. There's every once in a while we'll do one on a Zoom or virtual. But yeah, basically what happened was when we made the rebrand to Travis Makes Friends, we really wanted to try to tackle YouTube. And for the longest time, we just didn't do anything on YouTube. Frankly, it was just a mistake. We should have just been throwing our audio interviews up on YouTube the whole time anyway. I just had this aversion to doing, again, like it went against my like creator side, where it was like, if we're going to do video, we need to do video well, instead of throwing up a split screen Zoom interview on YouTube. And when I first started, they were all audio only interviews. We weren't even recording video. I was just doing audio only Skype interviews, and then Zoom started coming out, 2018, 2019. We started doing Zoom, and then we would do it on video anyway, just to collect the footage and have like a, eye to eye connection with the guest, but we didn't publish any video anywhere. It was all audio. And so for a long time, I had an aversion to doing video because I was just like, it doesn't look good. It's not going to perform well. And like I said, I should have just thrown stuff up there just to have some sort of history on YouTube and start like pointing my listeners in that direction. But I didn't, and it is what it is. And when we rebranded to Travis Makes Friends, it was like, okay, we're doing this other thing that we really want to try to tackle YouTube. So at the beginning of last year, we got into YouTube, and we've been slowly making waves over there a little bit. So it's a beast of a platform to tackle, which is why I say I should have done it when I first started, just throwing up the stuff on there. But now that was the reason for the commitment to try to make all of these interviews happen in person.
Would you say that if somebody's starting scratch, that it should be a YouTube video first podcast in 2024?
The answer is yes. However, I say that now with the luxury of being able to like afford to hire a producer and like afford to have video equipment, and you know what I mean? So like I say that I should have been throwing these things up on YouTube when I first started, but when I first started, like I was on such a shoestring budget. I was like doing a lot of stuff by myself. I was paying like a VA like $400 a month to help me edit and produce everything, and just didn't have a lot of like that was the main reason we were doing audio. It was more budgetary restrictions. It wasn't necessarily lack of wanting to have the video. You know what I mean? So doing video is just more expensive or more time consuming. You know what I mean? So if you're not a video editor by trade, it's like now you got to not just edit the audio, which nowadays is fairly simple with different AI tools that are out there, like, Descript and not Audacity, Alphonic, stuff like that. They remove background noise, they cut timelines, they do a lot of things for you on the audio editing side. So audio is a little bit easier to produce. And even if you don't produce it yourself, you can get like I said, you can get an audio engineer, like somebody with a degree in audio engineering in Columbia, to edit your show for $700 a month. You know what I mean? And they're extremely qualified, and you can pay them a good living for where they are. But as soon as you start introducing video, like, it's a lot more technically complicated. The file sizes are huge. So even just sharing the files with somebody that is editing in Bangladesh or something is different. But then they got to capture the video correctly, and like. There's a lot more technically complicated things. So like the answer to your question is yes. Like unequivocally, you should be recording video as well. It's just, if you're starting, don't let that be the thing that prevents you from starting, though, is I guess what I'm trying to say. It's like if you can't afford that, or like it's too big of a something to tackle, then don't worry about it. Collect the video for sure. Like don't just do audio, like collect the video and hold it somewhere for when you can afford to start doing more things. But yeah, don't let it be the thing to prevent you from starting. But if you're going to start and you want to do it well and you have some money in the bank, then absolutely you should be doing video first.
Yeah,
because YouTube is still the biggest podcast platform out there.
Yeah,
more podcasts are consumed on YouTube than any other platform.
Yeah, it's funny because Michael and I, as he was saying, we have a media background. So when we started, we're like, hey, we were handling, supply chain and distribution for Netflix and Disney. This can't be that hard. And then when you get into it, you're like, well, we don't have Disney's budget now. So while technically we know what the X's and O's are, it took us a while to figure it out at a low budget, shoestring budget. So yeah, I completely agree with you.
And I think with that too, because like you said, some of these AI tools are great, but also some of them give you a false impression that they're great. So depending on, you still got to go through, you still got to spend time. It saves you time. But it is also amazing how some of them can take, the multi-cameras and bring them together for you in one. And I think then that also becomes that other question to your point of whether you're on location or not, because once you are on location, there's a whole nother setup that has to come with that and what you have to consider as well. And it's interesting to see the number of these studios that have popped up. In fact, for you, do you use, do you own the studio you use, or do you rent a studio whenever you have guests?
So this is my home studio that we're in right now, that I'm in right now. And so whenever we have people come through Vegas, we use my home studio. But I do travel out for a decent number of interviews as well. And whenever I'm traveling, I rent a studio somewhere, and book time with them. Yeah.
Got it. But I was thinking about it as I, realizing you're in Vegas. I'm like, what is up with all these content creators, whatever you want to say, who are in there? Like, I think Hermosi's have theirs out there. I think Ryan Panetta, like, I've just been recently, like, all these I keep coming across. I'm like, is everybody in Vegas these days? Did you grow up there, or what made you end up finding your way to Vegas?
No, I grew up in SoCal. But the thing is, it wasn't like a great part of Southern California. It was
which part? Arden and I were both in Glendale for a while there. He's now towards La Crescenta, but I was in the Valley for a while.
I grew up in the Antelope Valley.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So Lancaster, Palmdale.
Yep. We know it. Yep.
So yeah,
the houses were a lot cheaper there. There's that.
Oh, they're a lot cheaper for sure, but they're a lot cheaper for a reason.
Yeah, it's fair. Yeah.
So yeah, it was one of those things where it was where I grew up, but I knew that nothing happened there, and I hated that. It was just like I want to be around things where I want to be in a place where like things are happening, where people are excelling and there's energy and there's people are coming in and out of the city all the time, and it's a good place to connect with other people and all that kind of stuff. And so we were actively looking to get out of Lancaster around the time we were moving. It was just like we were just trying to figure out where, because a lot of my family and a lot of our friends, people I grew up with, are still in Southern California, so I didn't want to go like East Coast or whatever. And Vegas, is the desert, but Lancaster is also the desert. It's just a worse version of it. So that didn't bother me at all. No state income tax was like giving yourself a 14% raise coming from California. The airport's awesome. I love the Vegas airport. It's easy to navigate. It's quick. In Lancaster,
I was
it's
just
like
there a couple of weeks
driving
ago.
around. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, were you? Yeah. It's and that exact response is like one of the reasons I'm still here. Is like every time I say I live in Vegas, that's the exact response. It was either like, oh, I was just there, or oh, I'll be there next month or whatever. Like everybody comes to Vegas once a year.
And it has to make it easier with guests. I almost wonder if it's even addition. It's like, hey, if you're stopping off, it's like, well, why not? I'll be there. I'll do it. And then, oh, business expense, depending on how you look at it, there's also other ways that you're able to look at it.
For sure, part of it. Yeah. Because like there's probably 5 or 6 guests right now that have already said yes to the show. It's just that like, hey, next time you come through Vegas, hit me up. You know what I mean? So we don't even have something scheduled. It's just like, they're like, oh, I'm in Vegas like 4 times a year. So I was like, okay, cool. Text me next time you're in Vegas and we'll make it work. You know what I mean? So that would never happen in Lancaster. Like nobody just like coming to Lancaster. So
yeah, that's fair. Or they'll show up and what is the other Lancaster, Pennsylvania or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm curious. So with the longevity that you have had here, like if you had to kind of identify 3 key things that helped you to, again, reach, you're just about there yet. I think I'm premature in saying 1,000, but you're not far off. What 3 things would you say help lead to your longevity?
The first thing was commitment, because I don't think at the beginning, if I had committed, I think at the very beginning I said like, I'm going to do this 3 episodes a week for 2 years minimum without caring about the results. And if nothing comes from it in 2 years of doing this, then I'll stop or pivot or do something different. But I knew at the very beginning, like this is just going to take time. And so after the 2 years, it was like I had enough results to be like, okay, let's keep doing this and, maybe adjust and make some changes or whatever, but let's keep doing this because it's going to work. So the first thing was commitment. The commitment is what like got me over the hump. I call it like the callus phase. So like when I first started playing the guitar in high school, I literally was just like, maybe I'm just one of those people that just can't learn the guitar. Like maybe it's just like not something that's doable for me. Cause like when you first start playing, you can't form a chord. You can't strum to any sort of rhythm. Your fingers hurt all the time. The guitar, like even when you do form a chord, you strum and the guitar's buzzing and the strings sound terrible and it's all bad. But what happened, like the reason all that sucks is like your fingers hurt because you're literally forming calluses from the steel strings on the tips of your fingers. And then once those calluses are formed, you can actually push the strings down and they stay down and the buzzing goes away. And then you play a chord and you're like, oh, that actually sounds like a G chord. You know what I mean? And then you learn the C chord, you can switch, and then you can learn a song with just a G chord, a C chord, and a D chord. And it's like after 3 or 4 months, you get over the hump, you get over the callus phase, then it becomes a little bit easier and a little bit more fun to practice and get better. But that initial phase just sucks so bad, and you feel like you're a 2-year-old trying to walk, that it just like, it's not that phase is no fun. And the only thing that's going to carry you through that phase is the commitment to reach the light at the end of that tunnel, because you know it's going to come. And so the first thing was commitment for sure, because if you don't commit, the results only come quickly for like one-off lucky few people, and you cannot base your desire on those people's results. It's just not duplicatable, repeatable, and your expectations are going to be too wildly high and you will quit. Which is evidenced by the fact that there's over 4 million podcasts in existence and less than 300,000 of them are actually actively releasing episodes.
That's something we read on. We're like, wow, it automatically puts you in like the top at least 3, if not 1% pretty quickly just by sticking with it, which is
right. Just by being consistent. So the first thing was commitment. The second thing I would say would be like all of the other reasons to podcast. Let me actually insert a different one here. So the second reason I would say would be the end result was still always worth it to me. Like it was always just like, even if this takes me 15 years, if I built up a massive audience of people who cared about what I say, and I could just have conversations with awesome people full time and make 7 figures a year doing it, that's a pretty great case scenario. Even if, like I said, even if it takes me 15 years, 20 years, I don't care. Like that's an awesome way to make a living. Objectively awesome. So like the end results still mattered enough to me to be able to continue pushing toward it. And then the third thing would be that the journey along the way, there's still a ton of reasons to do it, even if you don't ever get to the result that you really wanted. So it's those three things, like the commitment for the beginning. The second thing is just, if you really want the end result, then it's worth putting in the work now. And then the third thing is if you can learn to enjoy the work that you have to put in to get to the end result, then it just makes it a no-brainer. Because like, even at this point, man, I'm podcasting for 7 years. Like, I'm so frustrated with YouTube. Like we're sitting at like 4,500 subscribers, and we've been doing this for like 7 years. I mean, YouTube, we only doing for a year, and we started in January of last year, so a year and a half almost. But on YouTube, and it's just like, man, it's a slow grind, man. It's just like I'm starting over at 5 years, and it's like, man, this sucks. But also, like, if nothing had come from the show in the meantime, and it was only me just hanging on for that potential end result one day, then it would be way more difficult. But there's so many other benefits that I've gotten that have come along without audience growth at all. Like, even if you take away audience growth, it's just like connections, perfecting interview style, or improving communication skills, like increasing overall empathy for my fellow human beings, like connecting with people I never thought would give me the time of day, and now I can text them and they actually text me back. You know what I mean? It's like those things are crazy, and they're extremely valuable. The knowledge that I gain, like anytime I jump on a interview with somebody, it's me scratching my own curiosity itch. And I get it's almost like a free one-on-one coaching session with people who are way smarter than I am, way more successful than I am. Just the knowledge I've gained from doing the show is one thing, but the knowledge that I gain outside of the show, because I feel like I owe the people who listen to me the highest quality content that I can give them, it's like it also keeps me accountable to continuously reading new books, or reading articles that I wouldn't have read, or watching YouTube videos that I wouldn't have watched, because I don't want to sound like a dummy on my own show to my own audience. So I try to educate myself more clearly on the things that I'm going to talk about. So it's the best knowledge gaining accountability partner that there is. It's the best connection tool that I've ever used. It has given me the credibility and authority to like build, to generate millions of dollars for my businesses over the last few years. It's put me on stage. It's flown me to Australia and Puerto Rico to speak at events. Like, there's a bunch of other reasons to have the show, even if the audience never grew to the size I really want it to grow to. So all of those reasons still make it worth doing it. But like I said, at the end of the day, it's still just like, even if it takes me another 10 years from now to get to my YouTube channel to whatever, 2 million subscribers or 1 million subscribers, it's like, yeah, but that's still pretty worth it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's like, because I can clock in 7 figures annually with like 85% profit margins, talking to like my heroes. Like, that's not a bad way to make a living.
Like a dream job right there. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. If you build an audience like that, and now what everybody's really figuring out is like, it's way easier to build businesses if you have an existing audience to sell your stuff to, because you don't have to have a marketing line item in your budget. That's why Mr. Beast Feastables is so successful. That's why Prime Hydration did $1.2 billion in revenue last year. That's why Terramana Tequila is the most successful launch of any spirits company in history, because it's the rock that's attached to it. It's because Logan Paul is promoting Prime. It's because Mr. Beast is promoting Feastables. Like, the fact that they have these audiences built in, they save 30% in marketing that goes directly to their bottom line, or it goes back into product development to make their product better than anything else in the market, or it goes into hiring the best executives that could possibly hire to help them have a successful company. Like, you can use it for so many things. Like, that's what people are really figuring out now, is just, even this guy that's in Vegas right now, I forget his name, but he has a podcast out here. And I think what he did first was he did like food influencer stuff. Like, he just was like a foodie, and he lives in Vegas. And so, Vegas is a destination spot. So he grew a pretty big I think he has close to 1 million followers just doing like, check out this food spot in Vegas and blah, blah, blah. So he just talks about food all the time. And he started a podcast that's also Vegas based. But his personal brand's bigger just because of the food stuff that he does. So him and a partner recently started an ice cream shop in Vegas called Sorry Not Sorry. And it's a creamery, a Sorry Not Sorry creamery. And they opened one location. And the numbers that I heard, and I have not verified this, but a friend of mine like knows them, and he was like, yeah, they're clocking $20K a month in profit on like one like 1,200 square foot retail box, which is insane for that type of a business. And so I think they just opened their 5th or 6th location in Vegas. So like that's a great example to me, because it's like that he's not The Rock, right? He doesn't have 400 million subscribers. He's not building a $5 billion business like Terramana, but he built a great local brand reviewing food in telling people about the hidden food spots in Vegas that you got to go try, and then built his own ice cream shop that now has 5 locations. And that business, like if they continue to build it and the profit margins are really that good, it's only a matter of time before they franchise. And in 5-10 years from now, they could have $1 billion exit from a business like that, all branching from the thing that this guy built, which was just an audience of people who followed him to figure out where they should eat in Vegas. You know what I mean? Like that's the stuff that I'm like, yeah, a decade, even if it takes me another decade, 15 years to build up an audience of people who give a shit about what I talk about all the time. Yeah, it's pretty worth it if you get to that result at some point, you know, and then like you get all these benefits along the way. It's just, it just makes a lot of sense to me.
And for all you know, it'll be with one of your other friends you meet who you're doing it with. And now it just accelerate it faster because as you said,
there's one business that we're working on right now that I can't talk much about because it's still in the back burner. But somebody I met through podcasting who was actually a client of ours and we helped launch a show for that, like there's something that we have in the works that we're trying to build right now, physical, like brick and mortar type space in Vegas that I'm really, really excited for. And he's the perfect partner for it. And like, that wouldn't have come about if I didn't do all this stuff, you know what I mean? And I wouldn't be able to fill that place up with customers once it opens, if I didn't do this stuff as well. So, yeah, man, like I said, there's just so many reasons to keep doing it.
Michael and I always joke that podcasting has been our hack to meeting people, because otherwise you put us in the room with the strangers, we're total introverts. But here it's natural to us. It's great.
It's like there's purpose. It's weird.
Yeah, exactly. I call it the Trojan horse of networking, because it's just like it gets you in past the gatekeepers, you know. And then you can jump out of the horse and try to build a real friendship. You know, it's up to you what you do with it at that point. But like most people can't get through the gate. They can't even initiate the connection. You know what I mean? Because they're coming in with an ask right out of the gate. Like they're trying to get this person to partner with them or do something for them. Look, I just want to have a conversation. Like it's so much easier to get your horse past the gatekeeper. You know what I mean? When you're just a podcast host trying to have a conversation with somebody. And if something comes from it, great. And if something doesn't come from it, whatever. We still had a great conversation. You know what I mean? And something might come from it later on. Like you just don't know. That's the nature of doing this. Like it's engineering serendipity.
You know, it's one of the things we've talked about now. And by the way, I love that engineering serendipity. One of the things Art and I have talked a little bit more about, though, is as we've had, number of guests on, it's trying to maintain also those relationships a bit so that it is also not one of those that's a, high and buy, which still takes a little bit of, time and effort. It's not terribly difficult, but it's kind of like networking in general, people in life. It's that thing that always, is unfortunate where people are like, until they need a job, that's when they finally start reaching out and networking. Do you have a method or way, since you're building out this crazy network, that you actually think about? I'm not saying you have to have a CRM, but how do you manage and keep track of this when you're somebody who's literally making a friend a week or whatever it is now?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's a good CRM actually out there called Relatable that I recommend people use, because it's more like a relationship management system rather than like a customer relationship management system, because they're not like, this was one that's built for relationships, not built for like converting customers into sales. So I like that one a little bit better. But for me, it's more just trying to figure out ways to connect those people together. It's actually been a little while since I've done this. Unfortunately, I need to do another one. But once a year, twice a year, I'd put on an event and I invite out all the people who've been a guest on my show, as well as like investors in my company, people that I know that I think would add value there. And I put on like a 50 to 100 person just private event. I pay for the whole thing and I bring out as many people as I can to it, to try to stay in contact with all the people that I've connected with, and then also add value to them, because, connecting people together is a massive value add. And just putting a bunch of really great people in a room, there's always like, it's bound to just create good things for everybody that comes out to it. So that's one thing. I know a couple of friends of mine, they put all their guests in a group chat. Just like if they needed anything, they put them all in like a WhatsApp group chat to connect with them. Some people do like Zoom calls to try to connect with them. For me now, it's a lot of like, re-engagement with my text messages. So like I'll just go through and try to send 5 to 10 texts per week, like videos to people who I've connected with in the past 6 months to a year who I haven't talked to in a while, and I'll just send them a quick video message to let them know I'm thinking about them, or to say thank you for something that they did for me, or just to reconnect with them and get back in their world. So I'll do that kind of re-engagement activity at least once a week. With just sending out videos to different people and trying to stay in contact with them.
That's awesome. I feel like this is that book you're talking about. There's all these to actually go into whatever that
It's
future.
funny. It's funny you say that, dude, because it's like I have the outline already written, and this is exactly the stuff that I'm putting into it. So
That's great. Super valuable.
yeah. All I got to do now is write 80,000 words for it. So
Yeah. Yeah. Right. That's all. Easy piece of cake.
Yeah.
I know we're coming to the end of the hour here, so just a couple more things I want to ask. First off, going back to Guestio, Art and I have both leveraged Guestio, and we're a fan of it. Curious, what's next for Guestio, or what are kind of your goals as you look at the company's future?
Yeah, so we just brought on a couple partners, which is great. I'm not a tech guy, which is weird for somebody who built software. But because of that, we ran into some issues scaling the software. And so I partnered with a couple of guys recently. One of them's taking on like tech and ops from my plate. They're the ones taking on marketing and finance from my plate. So I can just focus on like sales and content. And so we're really excited for the next like phase of growth, because I think that it'll really, I think that we'll really kind of take off from this point. We built a really, really solid foundation. We have a validated, proven offer. We know that we can help people and serve people. But it's more now, we built it for podcasters to book guests, but now what we really work on is helping guests book themselves onto podcasts, just because there's a much larger market for that.
Mm-hmm.
So our concierge service, we represent authors, entrepreneurs, founders, people who want exposure to their offers, their books, their podcasts, their whatever. And we represent them, and we go get them booked on podcasts, kind of like a PR service, but instead of publications, we pitch exclusively podcasts. So that's our like white glove done for you concierge service. It's thousands of dollars a month, so it's a little high ticket, but we also deliver really great results there. And then we have our software. And so the big thing that's coming with the software is just like a rekeying of some of like the key features. We're going to remove a couple of things and just make it a lot more simple. We kind of overbuilt when we first built it out. And so now we're kind of just going to remove some things and get back to the core focus, which is really going to be like helping people get booked on shows. So podcasters can go in there, create a profile, set like a price to be on their show, to be like a sponsored guest on the show, so that they can actually monetize their podcast a little bit more. And if they're like interviewing people, like for me, for beginning podcasts, like a lot of times it's like, you don't have to make $5,000 for the guest or something, but like $50 would be nice sometimes. It's like, hey, we got 400 listeners, and we're going to be promoting your product or service to our audience. And it costs us money to produce this. We're independent podcasters. We're not Forbes or Entrepreneur or Inc. Like, we don't have a media budget like you guys are talking about. So we think that that's very fair. So a lot of podcasters come to Guestio to like monetize their podcast a little bit. And we've had podcasters make thousands of dollars through people paying to be a guest on their show, people who they probably would have interviewed anyway. It's just that they're helping pay expenses. So the FTC basically says, like, as long as you disclose it, then it's all good. So, we just recommend people say some verbiage at the beginning of the episode, like, hey, everybody, this episode is sponsored by today's guest, so-and-so. We're going to talk about these things and whatever. And it's like, okay, well, you get paid $100 a guest spot. It's like, well, we made $400 or $500. That helps us cover cost of production or whatever, So I'm trying to like help give back a little bit to the creators, but also it's a big value add to the guests, because they get to get on and promote their products and services that they make money off of, and they can grow their business that way. So we're trying to get singularity of focus, rekey some things in the software, and scale the agency up.
Love it. When we discovered it too, it's like, brilliant concept. So it's fantastic. If people want to find you, obviously it sounds like Guestio is one way. How should they reach out if they want to leverage any of those services you mentioned?
Yeah, you can go to guestio.com/concierge if you want the white glove service, or just guestio.com to create it. You can create a free account and browse around there. If you are interested in the concierge service, you can just email me, travis@guestio.com, and we can jump on a call and see if you'd be a good fit, because we're pretty picky on clientele there, because we cap our client list because there's just frankly not a ton of great high quality podcasts out there. And so we can't bring on whoever we want to bring on, just because the inventory is not super available. So while we do want to scale it, we will cap it off. So we're still kind of pretty picky on who we work with in that context. But I'm always happy to jump on a call and see if you'd be a good fit. So 7-8 figure business owners are typically the best people, like people who already have marketing channels that are open, that are already working, and they want to add another layer of marketing in and test a new channel. We're a really great additional channel to add into existing marketing channels. So guestio.com/concierge. You can just email me, travis@guestio.com. That's like guest, be my guest, io.com.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you coming on. I really enjoyed it. We got some things we're going to implement.
I appreciate you guys. Thanks for coming prepared and asking great questions. Yeah.
Yeah, I wish we had more time. I had so many little in the weed questions for you, but all of
Let's
it
do it again sometime.
Awesome. Thank you, Travis.
Yes, sir.